Thank you very much, Monique, for your nice words. I feel much more comfortable now that I know I need to entertain people after the lunch. And especially on a topic like this, you know, you got a wonderful conversation this morning. I was thrilled by lots of what I heard this morning, and you will see that I will also reflect on this in a few minutes. Then you invite this guy who is supposedly talking about the future of the internet, right? Each time I've been asked to do this, I remember that there were a guy in the past who also tried to predict the future. It's not just guys, real tough guys, you know, brains who said that kind of stuff. And as you know, the internet doesn't forget anything. And whatever you say might just be on the slideshow in 5 years from now. And so that's the reason why we at the Internet Society made this exercise as the NGI and the European Commission did, and that is, okay, let's have a look on what it is that the Internet might look like in 5 to 7 years from now. We didn't do that, or actually we did do that in a more cautious way, and we talked to 3,000 people around the world. We made broad conversation with our community, beyond our community, with policymakers, academics, policymakers, of course, government, the technical community, businesses across the regions. And we try to define what would be what we call the driver of change. And that are what are the forces that will happen and might definitely shape or reshape the internet as we know it today. And we end up with 6 of those drivers of changes, and we have identified areas of impact. We've done this in 2017, last year. This is published on our website, internetsociety.org. I would invite you to check this. I will go through rapidly some of those. We have addressed some of those this morning already, and I believe we will continue talking about that today. Ethics and artificial intelligence, of course, what it is behind technology, what kind of conversation we should have. Firstly, that would be about ethics. Something that to me is very close to my heart, and this is the IoT. I mean, we had someone from Gartner this morning. I see Gartner figures evolving every 2 weeks. Now we're talking about 35 billions of IoT devices by 2022. 35 billions. You know that everything you put on the internet becomes part of the internet. It gives you an idea of the broad scope of vulnerabilities that we might face soon in terms of security and loss of privacy. The fact also is that IoT will become something with a physical impact in our lives. I mean, this is the example that Vint Cerf always takes. You are in your bath, you tap 3 times of your bath, the bath recognizes you, give you your volume, your weight, your everything. And then you go and try to take something in your fridge, and you see something on your screen saying, you better run before you take this ice cream. I mean, that will be the internet of tomorrow, if everything is connected to everything in your kitchen, in your apartment. Of course, cyber attacks, cyber wars, cyber crime, and something that I believe is worth a conversation, that is consolidation. The internet economy is drastically changing. We see big dogs out there that now are able to seize the internet through different layers, the services layers, the access layers, and the application of the platform layers, vertical integration. What do we do with this? I believe Europe has some very good tools. We call it competition law. I believe this is worth a conversation at international level. I just don't see similar tools outside, and yet this is something we need to address. Of course, the impact on media and culture and those bubbles that we talk about, going from fake news to the bubble of Facebook, those are the kind of conversation we have. So this is what we call drivers of change. We at the Internet Society use actually to evaluate the future of the internet through what we feel are the internet DNA, what we call the environs. The internet has been based on very strong principles. Those are the ones. No central control. Every time we see the internet with a sense of we need to centralize it for your security. That's not the internet anymore. The internet has no central controls and no ownership other than a global ownership. Collaborative engagement model, open technical standards. We can talk hours about those proprietary standards that might have an effect to fragment the internet because you guys cannot talk to each other if you are on a platform and someone else in your family use another platform. Transparent process and the best effort transport. The internet is based on best effort. I just try to share something with you. If it doesn't reach out to you, I need to do it again, period. This is best effort. No guarantee on bandwidth. We're talking about something else. Strong principle, user centricity. The internet is a user-centric platform. The openness, good news, bad news. Good news, everybody can access it. Bad news, the bad guys can access it as well. Let's discuss about security. And permissionless innovation. It doesn't mean you can ethically do whatever you want on the internet, but internet is based on the fact that you can access it and launch new services without asking for permission. So that is how we see the internet. Those are the DNA. This is the invariance of the internet. These pictures of an open, accessible node of the internet might be threatened. And that is the kind of conversation that we need to have in this room. And the first issue that is very scary from us in the technical community is the fragmentation of the internet, that we might end up having different intranets around the world. Fragmentations can come first, of course, by governments. I was talking about quotes that you once said and that you may be regretting. Let's have Europe in Schengen, you know? Well, let's have the internet with some borders. How fun is it? Or there won't be any bits or bytes of my internet going through the US regions, said Dilma Rousseff when she discovered that the NSA were spying on the world. I mean, I'm sorry, the internet doesn't know borders. So sorry, but some of your internet might just travel the US and you just don't even know. Data localization, the good idea that the data of my citizens should stay in my country. Many countries and many leaders are suggesting this. How do you do that concretely? How does it work in a global internet? Other regulations. There are no, and this is also a conversation that I believe we should have. I'm obsessed by this now. I'm a great fan of GDPR. Let's be clear. This is giving user a control of their data. This is what we want. This is transparency. This is empowering users. But the GDPR is extraterritorial. So what if other regions in the world start competing with this GDPR regulation, saying we will beat you on that one? I've heard this from the US side. What if they do something else? We already know that people in Europe can no longer access some website in the US because some US websites say we won't abide to the GDPR. What if other regions start playing these games, having their own extraterritorialities? That is also a fragmentation of the internet. So that is a conversation that we need to have at the international level. Of course, the fragmentation comes from business as well. This wonderful world when you're using a platform and you no longer are able to communicate with someone else on another platform. That is another sort of fragmentation. The consolidation of the internet economy, the wonderful world of the applications. You no longer are on the internet, as you know. You're using something which is a walled garden again. But consolidation is more vertical. This is also about the access. This is also about the service layers. What do we do? I believe regulations might be an option, but we need a conversation as well. Those are the big threats that I can see, and that I would call fragmentation of the internet. The other one is trust. The internet is based on trust. The lack of trust has so many detrimental effects, and honestly, the internet has faced so many attacks that might just endanger the trust that people have on it. Mass surveillance, censorship, net neutrality or platform neutrality, insecurity. We made with Ipsos a global survey 2 years ago showing that 2 among 3 people said that their behavior changed since the NSA revelation, that they behave changed because they no longer want or trust the internet. That is terrible. It means people will use the internet in another way. It might endanger so many things. The repercussion is people don't trust governments. Governments don't trust each other, hence data localization. A monitor internet, self-censoring. That is my favorite example. People a few years ago in the US no longer wanted or dared to use some terminology on Google because they fear that they might be monitored by their government. Words like Islam or religion, or even died because people felt that if they're being monitored by government, they might be monitored by their own insurance. And if they start trying to find out recipe for, I don't know, sugar diet, they might have the insurance knowing about this and increasing their rates. You see, that is self-censoring, and we see that clearly from some data. The Internet of Things, I said that is a major concern from our perspective. The Internet Society decided that we will embark on a whole campaign trying to secure and ensure that manufacturers and IoT resellers ensure that privacy and security is embedded in the device. That's a very ambitious goal. We want to make sure that this happens because IoT might be the next big threat to the security and privacy of people. As a conclusion, those are the conversations that we need to have, and I was very happy to hear this morning. Ethics at the center of new technologies. We are very good at talking about technologies, but why don't we start talking about human values first and then decide how the technology should look like in the future? This is what I hear in these kind of rooms, and I'm very happy about that. Human rights should be offline, online, no difference. The users in control of the data, users in control of the data is fundamental because it brings trust. So GDPR, again, is a fantastic tool to regain or make sure that users regain trust, but that should remain the principle. Close the digital divide. I mean, just not people who have it or don't have it. We now know that mostly in the future, everybody might access in some way the internet. Well, we're not there yet. There are still billions of people outside of the internet. But in countries where people have the internet, we see also differences in the usage and what it is that people can access and those that can't. Security in a collaborative approach. Security is too important an issue just to leave it between government to discuss. We believe that everybody should be involved. And of course, empower people to share their own futures. All those questions to me are very important. You will find this being reflected in our report on the future of the internet. Very happy to be here today. Thanks for the opportunity.
If you want to stay for a second, before leaving Frédéric, I would like to see if we will take 2 questions maximum from the audience. A quick question from this side, and then a quick question from this side. Please. If you can get up, maybe we can hear if you are.
Okay. Philippe de Wolf, Yellow Window, Policy Design. You are the first speaker today to talk about digital divide. And so I've heard a lot about technology development, but we know that the gap between the technological innovation and the usage adaptation is widening. So how is that going to be addressed by NGI? Do we know?
Well, I believe the NGI will address it exactly in the way we're talking now, because the question that you're talking about is something we know cannot be addressed just by some specific stakeholders. It's failing. Just governments are talking about this for ages. We now know that civil society and academics needs to be involved in those conversations because the difference, and you pointed exactly what I wanted to say, this is just not about the have and the have not. There is something more particular here, and this is education. This is the manner people will use it. This is also in Western countries with so-called 98% of access to the internet. Lots of people who can just not access some information that they might need for themselves. So this needs to be addressed in a multi-stakeholder way. I would rely on the NGI to drive this in the way I just said it.
Thank you, Frédéric. Thank you for the question. Is there another quick question from the floor? Please. I don't have the mic with me, but yeah.
Thank you, Federico. Just take your last mention, multi-stakeholder, a bit further. as the internet changes, so there's the way we have to interact with the governance of the internet. Do you have any hints for us as we move a project like next generation deployments in terms of how to get people engaging in that governance effectively?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. So this is a while we're discussing about multi-stakeholder process, and we came to a state where people hear this and say, yeah, we're there. We have those kind of conversations. It's not true. We see a very dangerous decrease in involvement of different stakeholders in the conversation. So to us, we will have an IGF in Paris soon this year. I believe they will be top on the conversations. How could we have an active communities contributing to this? Because data show that, honestly, there is a decrease in contributions. There is a decrease in transparency and participation. So that there is a role of governments to better educate citizens. I was being asked today, how could we involve, or should citizens be involved in those kind of conversations? The immediate answer is users, all of them, all of us will be impacted by those many threats that we're talking about, by consolidations, by security, by privacy losses. So they need to be involved. There is a role for every of us to be those ambassadors to try to involve our communities. So in the internet society, we believe that we should continue to engage with even those communities we haven't talked about yet. Youth, how can we engage those millennials that are difficult to talk to? So yes, there is an effort, and I believe, again, I'm sorry to come back on this, it's like a truism. We only can address this if there are people in the room. So again, let's continue those kind of platforms.
Thank you very much. I think I don't see any other urgent question. So thanks a lot, Frédéric. A big applause. Merci beaucoup.